life for true. Yeah, I took life for true.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted realms of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean. And welcome to episode 24.
I think this is the last part of our
The
Reincarnation.
Life Before Life book coverage.
Our first Reincarnation little series,
Yeah.
which seems like reincarnation is going to come up in a lot of other things too.
It will reincarnate in our podcast multiple times.
For sure. It's going to, and there's just a lot of, there's a lot of connections between a lot of the stuff we've been going over too, like the secret history of the world and, you know, a lot of the different theories of the past and, you know, archaeology and stuff that they're finding. So it's all kind of cool. And reincarnation is just another aspect of it, the unknown knowledge of our past.
I think the topic is important not just because of reincarnation's sake, but because of the implications it has.
Yeah.
You know, if reincarnation is real, then it essentially proves that there is some sort of soul.
Right. And it lends credence to all the other.
Death.
Yeah. And it lends to a lot of the different theories of, you know, religious theories and spiritual, ideas throughout the world. Like, yeah, it kind of reaches all of it.
It's an interesting theory. I'm gonna show my nerd off here, but there's an interesting theory in the MCU. If you follow all the MCU stuff, about how like the afterlife works, because throughout multiple different MCU films, you've seen like different takes on the afterlife.
Yeah,
like in Black Panther, you see him like with a tree with his ancestors and the Panthers, right? With Thanos, after he snaps, he goes into a totally different looking
kinda
realm.
like a purgatory
he sees young
thing.
Gamora.
Yeah.
In Moon Knight, you see like the Egyptian Duat.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think there's even more than that. But in like the people who are like theorizing about it are essentially saying that like probably what is going on is that it just depends on what your beliefs are as a human, and like you will essentially have the afterlife experience that you kind of culturally expect to have. So if you're raised a Christian and you sort of expect a heaven and hell, like maybe that kind of sets you up for that. And if you're someone who believes in Buddhism and just reincarnation, like maybe those are why some of those people reincarnate right away.
Right. And if you believe in that, then you believe that there's a soul outside, and that there is some sort of like soul purpose that keeps us incarnating to learn something, to grow, right? And even after you die, you know, here in this physical world, and you're going on to whatever middle place there is, that soul is not there. That you're not that yet. So even after you die, there's still more to journey and learn. Like your soul purpose is still outside of that, and it's all part of a journey and the reincarnation cycle is part of that. Like you probably do other things. Like there might be a whole different type of existence and time. You could still pop back in and reincarnate at a certain time, and you could have lived however long in this middle realm. Unless, like in the stories we talk about, like a lot of them are pretty close to when things happened. But also those are traumatic cases. The
average is like,
a lot of
I think
times.
he said, 18 months or so?
Yeah, so that's pretty quick. Yeah.
But some
that's
of them are
also
longer.
A lot of those are like where they, had like some kind of like quick, instant, like out of the norm type of death, not like dying on their deathbed or, in their 80s or whatever. Usually it's a short life or something that ends
Or
there.
just abrupt.
Abrupt. Yeah. So maybe that has something to do with how quick it happens, or the turnaround might be.
Could be.
Or it's just their connection to their family or whatever.
Right.
But so how do you want to start this one?
Well, let's I guess start out with some of the. Well, should we start out with some of the random things we brought, or maybe just cover as much of the book as possible, and if we get through it, then we can fill the rest with that.
Yeah, we can start a segment with something too. Later. Cool. Let's get into it. This is Reincarnation Part 5.
Heck yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to recall exactly where we left off.
And for anybody who maybe clicked on this video before they went to another video, even though they should stop this video and go back to the first Reincarnation episode, then come back. What book is this again? What's the name of this book?
This is called Life Before Life by Jim B. Tucker, MD.
Gotcha.
So we're in a chapter now, chapter 9, called Opposing Points of View. And he's talking about the materialist view. He spends some time on that, and he kind of argues it a bit, and then he goes into another section called Other Pieces of Evidence. And I think we went over this first little paragraph that I have highlighted, but why don't we start there as a refresher and then continue.
Okay.
So he says, does evidence exist to support the idea of consciousness continuing after a patient dies? One area of research into this question is the field of near-death experiences. Yeah, we did talk about this. Many people who survive an incident in which they came very close to death or are clinically dead for a short period of time report experiences that they had during that time. These often involve an impression of leaving their bodies and witnessing events from above, then going to another realm where they meet deceased relatives or religious beings. Much of this is subjective, of course, and can't be proven, but some people have reported hearing and seeing events take place below them during the near-death experience that were later verified to have happened. One of these, Pam Reynolds, accurately described medical equipment that was not visible while she was awake, and a conversation that took place in the operating room while she was conscious or unconscious during surgery for a brain aneurysm in which her body was cooled to 60 degrees, her heart was stopped, and the blood was drained from her body.
Holy shit.
In another example, Dr. Bruce Grayson here at the University of Virginia investigated the report of a man named Al Sullivan about his experience during an emergency coronary bypass operation. He said that when he looked down on the scene during his near-death experience, he saw his surgeon flapping his elbows. The surgeon and Mr. Sullivan's cardiologist confirmed to Dr. Grayson that the surgeon does have the unusual habit of flapping his elbows after scrubbing in for surgery.
Wow.
So it is possible to sort of test the near-death experiences as well to see if there's verifiable information.
Yeah.
So one of the books in my queue is on near-death experiences, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be a fun little continuation of these ideas.
So then he goes on and he starts talking about mediums.
Like mediums, like...
Yeah, like psychic mediums.
Oh, okay. Well, as far as what, like being able to like actually tell, like give you some kind of reading into your past lives?
I'll read some of this then. Research with mediums, individuals who claim to communicate with the dead, also began in the late 1800s, though some mediums have either been exposed as frauds or have been found to give no information that they couldn't have inferred through normal means. Some gifted individuals who've been carefully studied have been able to demonstrate specific and personal knowledge about sitters, those who come to them for readings, and their deceased loved ones. I cannot speak today. One such medium, Mrs. Lenore Piper, was first studied by William James, the early American psychologist in the 1880s. She was also taken to England and studied by the Society for Psychical Research. Investigators went to great lengths to guard against fraud by using such measures as having detectives follow her for weeks to make sure she was not trying to find out information about the potential sitters. In that context, she produced intimate material in remarkable detail about the strangers who came for readings. Mrs. Osborne Leonard, a British medium. I read that as museum.
I was like, museumist?
Yeah. A British medium in the early 20th century was similarly studied and proved to be similarly impressive. She demonstrated a particular ability to provide information that was unknown to sitters at the time and was later verified to be accurate. In recent times, mediumship has practically become a cottage industry, with a number of mediums becoming television personalities. While this new group hasn't been investigated with the intensity that Mrs. Piper and Mrs. Leonard were, we have some have participated in recent studies, and other studies are ongoing. So that research is underway.
We need
as
a
the
new
writing
generation
of
of people who are willing to test these people.
But he's also talking about kind of the whole point here is trying to prove that like consciousness has an effect on the physical body, and that consciousness somehow exists outside of the physical body and can gather information about the world without the physical body being involved.
Right.
So earlier in this, he's also talking about things like people being able to like have health effects on each other through like meditation and prayer. He's talking about Dean Radin's research with random number generators.
Okay.
Have you heard about that research?
No.
Okay, so there's this guy Dean Radin who I believe I first saw in the. You remember What the Bleep?
Oh yeah.
He was in there. He works for, or he's at the Institute for Noetic Sciences.
Okay.
And they're like almost like a counter science institution in the sense that like they're like a renegade science institution. Like they fund research.
Gotcha. They're not
into
pulling
things
for
that are not fully understood
I see.
by science or accepted to even be possible. So they research that stuff. One of the things they research is random number generators, and so there's this phenomenon that he's been able to document in his research where if you people like meditating or praying or like certain big world events can cause random number generators to be less random. And they can actually document that with the statistics that the random number generators push out.
That's interesting.
So just things like prayer can actually change how often, a random number generator goes heads or tails or whatever random numbers.
It throws it off enough to be more or less than 50%.
It throws it off
50,
enough
50,
to change the standard
the odds.
statistics. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and it's unexplained why that's.
Are they focusing on it? Or are they just talking about random prayer and random
I don't
thought?
have all the fill-in details. I don't know if they're like getting people to focus on changing the random number generator or if it's other things.
Or if they're just seeing a correlation based on
I know he said
area
stuff
and population. Like that would be weird.
There's some big world events, like big things like 9/11 type scale things where like it causes random number generators to not be so random as well, which is weird and not obvious why that should be the case. Anyway, we should look into his stuff because I've never actually really followed up in detail.
somehow they're attached.
I've just heard people reference his work multiple times, and obviously I saw his little snippets on What the Bleep, but
All right.
I'd like to follow up on that lead as well.
Yeah, I'll have to familiarize myself with it.
Yeah, so he's talking about all this stuff, which is most of this is just flat out rejected by mainstream science, but like an open-minded, like honest scientist will say we don't know the answer to a lot of these things, right?
Right, just
and
straight
so
up.
he's bringing all this up to show mysteries.
Give me answers, or
all these
don't
things kind
deny
of point towards consciousness, having a different role than we normally think. Anyway, so he brings all that up to then go into this section where he says each of these fields has weaknesses along with strengths, but when you consider them as a group, you may wonder why mainstream science has ignored all the evidence that this research has produced. Science is very conservative, and its stability rests on the idea that new understandings of the world must fit with the previous knowledge about it. Biologist E.O. Wilson has used the term consilience to describe this. The jumping together of knowledge when facts and theories from different areas link and form a common foundation of knowledge. As he says, the explanations of different phenomena most likely to survive are those that can be connected and proved consistent with one another. Mm-hmm. Do you see what he's saying there? Mm-hmm. So consilience is the principle that if I am doing some sort of independent scientific research and I show evidence for a phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. If I can't link that phenomena into the existing body of scientific knowledge, if it doesn't connect into it, then it's less likely to be accepted. So it's not consilient with our body of knowledge.
With their box.
Right.
With the box that they have themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Though such a view is undoubtedly true, it can lead mainstream science to favor strongly the status quo for as long as possible. Right? So you're requiring consilience.
Right.
So here's the problem with consilience is when someone comes along with an earth-shattering, like a real big breakthrough, it will not be consilient because it will undermine a bunch of other scientific phenomena that's out there. Like when Einstein came up with, his stuff, a lot of science had to be, redone to fit with Einstein.
Yeah, okay. Or even like Tesla stuff too. Like Tesla would have taken down all the major corporations that were doing all the major things for all the major projects.
Tesla wasn't consilient and he got rejected, right? Yeah. Like all of his stuff got pushed away.
The hydrogen car guy.
His stuff got picked up from it. Like obviously we got AC power from him and a bunch of other stuff. But
then like the hydrogen car guy and like all these other like inventors that claim to have all this free like 0 point energy
exactly.
stuff.
If you come up with a way to make a car run off of water and you don't have a theoretical framework to connect that to our modern materialistic scientific state-of-the-art worldview, then it's not consilient. Because modern science says that's not possible to our best understanding. Who cares if your experiment shows that it works and you have one built and you can drive it?
Right.
We don't have theory to connect to it, so it's not consilient. One of those things has to go. And science is very conservative, so the last thing that they want to do is throw out their previous theories.
Especially because everything that they've been doing is hinged on a lot of these major sticking points that they're so rigid on,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The history of the field is filled with unfortunate examples in which mainstream science turned its back on large amounts of evidence that challenged conventional wisdom. These go back at least as far as Galileo, who had to go before the Inquisition in 1633 for advocating the idea that the Earth revolved around the sun. Other particularly infamous examples include the failure of scientists to recognize the existence of meteorites. Despite reports by farmers of rocks falling from the sky into their fields, scientists considered such an idea to be ridiculous. How could stones fall from the sky when there are no stones in the sky? Then there was poor. Have you heard that story?
I have, yeah, actually.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I heard it, but it was pretty recent that I heard it.
So that's really similar to like UFO phenomena, right?
Yeah.
Like farmers all over the world are having these sightings of meteors falling into their fields. They're telling scientists, and scientists are like, you guys, there's no rocks in the sky. Science gives us no reason to believe there's rocks in the sky. So obviously you're wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's when something isn't consilient, then one thing or the other has to give. You either have to be open-minded and think our scientific theory may need to adjust, may need to change.
Which never happens. Well, I wouldn't say never, but it happens very little.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Where did I leave off there? Yeah. Then there was poor Ignaz Semmelweis, an obstetrician in the 1800s who died in a mental institution at the age of 47 after he was vilified for producing data that showed that death rates during childbirth dropped significantly if doctors washed their hands before examining patients.
Yeah.
Not consilient. We don't have germ theory yet, so you're telling us to wash our hands and you're inconveniencing us. We want to deliver babies without washing hands. It's crazy.
So crazy.
In the 20th century, Alfred Wenger's idea of continental drift was initially ridiculed, despite considerable evidence to support it. Because as one geologist put it, if we are to believe Wegener's hypothesis, we must forget everything which has been learned in the last 70 years and start all over again. His theory languished for decades before it became the premise of the currently accepted idea of plate tectonics. Mainstream science, of course, has rightly rejected many kooky ideas. Determining which ideas should be considered and which should be rejected can be difficult. The conservative nature of science has been its biggest strength and its biggest weakness. The basic understanding of the world tends to change at a pace that is almost as slow as continental drift. But the reluctance to accept new ideas too readily keeps that understanding from bouncing back and forth haphazardly. The need for consilience, the ability of new knowledge to be woven into the fabric of current understanding, helps to filter out erroneous beliefs, but it can also keep new insights from being accepted.
Yeah, it's like just a double-edged sword that they weren't either. Like, it could be that they just didn't think that it would get to a point where they were rejecting good ideas, and then their I don't know, egos got the best of them over the time, and they were like, well, now we can reject anything that, is going to undermine my life's work or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're a geologist when someone comes up with the idea of plate tectonics and you've got whatever old theories.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of taking something that does have evidence but requires redoing 70 years worth of work is pretty daunting.
Right.
And so...
And they're all human.
Yeah. And he has a point that, like, consilience is a feature of science, too, right?
Yeah,
like,
it definitely has its
There are
pros.
some people with some wackadoo theories out there. Like,
you don't necessarily need to let in everything, but you need to be careful not to just get rid of everything because it's inconvenient,
right?
Or you don't have the funding, or you don't have the time, or like whatever it might be in your head.
Yeah,
But I now it's like
honestly, I think part of the problem
you
of
get groupthink a lot.
Yeah, I think part of the problem of consilience comes from the idea, or maybe it comes from like impatience. Like it's being unwilling to just say, I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
Or, like...
That's possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like just...
Well, let's fund some more research and figure it out.
Let's find out.
Like that you would...
And once we have a good understanding, then we'll publish something on it.
You would hope that if something gets presented to science that has enough like work and evidence behind it that is plausible but isn't consilient, you would hope that the way of handling it is to fund further research to then figure out whether or not it is
Right.
true. Like something that doesn't fit but has evidence should be a reason to actually fund more research instead of to defund people.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the downfalls of the society too. It's like you have different levels and different people have different, like a lot of the funding sources are,
Ian Stevenson, his funding came from a private donor who
really?
funded him like to the tune of millions of dollars back in the day too, which is pretty good money. And then he passed, and he thought he was going to lose his funding, but it turned out in his estate he left all that funding. But as soon as the dude passed, the university started threatening to shut down his reincarnation research. But when the funding came back through, then he was able to like set up his own institution and all that. But had it not been for some independently wealthy person funding reincarnation research at the university wasn't going to fund it.
Yeah. So
they just didn't. They would have had to say no to all that money because he only wanted that money to go towards reincarnation. So if the university wanted that money, it had to be used for that.
All right. So the funding continued. That's good.
Yeah. The question.
Hold on, sorry.
Go
It's
ahead.
just some rich person who's like reincarnated, and maybe it's like a reincarnated person who like remembers. And they're just like every life they come back like I'm just gonna
keep pushing it forward.
Yep.
Yeah. That's funny. The question for us is whether the idea of reincarnation could ever be consilient with what we know or think we know about the world in general. One problem is that we do not have an adequate theory to explain how reincarnation might work. We only have the outlines of a theory, based on the notion that consciousness is not confined to the brain. The consciousness in a particular individual continues to exist after that person dies and then can attach itself to a developing fetus, bringing memories, emotions, and even traumas with it. Though such a concept, it conflicts with a materialistic view of the world. When we consider the evidence for a separate and surviving consciousness, I've described along with recent ideas put forth by physicists, we can see that a blanket statement that anything that conflicts with materialist view of the universe must be false. We can see that a blanket statement that anything that conflicts with the materialist view of the universe must be false risks becoming considered one day as short-sighted as the past rejections by mainstream science of phenomena such as meteorites do now. The field of quantum mechanics may provide a model for how a world of consciousness could become consilient with our knowledge. The world of the universe's smallest particles has rules that are very different from the larger world that is made up of those particles, leading scientists to speak of quantum weirdness. But the field of quantum mechanics has been accepted alongside our understandings of the larger universe. Similarly, the rules of the world of consciousness may be very different from the rules of the material universe, but this would not preclude its acceptance as part of the universe as a whole. We will need to understand more about consciousness before most mainstream scientists would accept reincarnation. But the positions of well-respected scientists suggest that consilience might one day be possible. So that's kind of the overarching goal, is to like slowly and patiently continue to build and mount evidence, hoping that it will lead to information that will help us make it consilient with our current worldviews. But if our current worldviews need to change, it can't be consilient.
I was going to say, I would think that our worldviews would probably change, and then it would be kind of like grandfathered in as being part of like an overall like awakening to the way the world is actually working.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the gradualness of that would I mean, I think things would shift to the point where there's a point where people just like, let's revisit reincarnation now that we have all this other understanding or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think reincarnation is going to be the sticking point that's going to like push us over into like, you know, I think there's other things that could be discovered about our humanity that could.
Yeah. I mean, we're barking up a number of trees that all tie to the idea of consciousness, right? So we got reincarnation and near-death experiences. We got religion and, you know, comparative mythology.
Past life regressions.
We got past life regressions. We got the whole field of AI and trying to make AI conscious has big implications on what consciousness even is, how it might work.
Yeah, I mean, if we figure out how to make artificial intelligence, maybe that's the point that we understand our own consciousness.
Yeah. But you can see a world where like everyone sticks stubbornly to the materialist view and they keep doing this AI research in the materialist view and like end up spending so much time trying to crack the idea of making it conscious, never to be able to succeed, you know?
Yeah.
But that the other fields too is like Neuralink, cloning, all of these things have like implications on consciousness and will have something to say about whether or not the conscious aspect of us is the same as the physical aspect of us or is generated by it, you know?
Well, and that reminds me, and we're right at our first break, but I want to talk about Joe Rogan's episode with Rizwan.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that when we get back here.
Cool. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Duality Check.
Dude, I went and saw Jacob Collier last night. Have you seen any of his stuff?
No.
Oh,
I haven't.
My God.
Who is he?
I will be showing Drew some Jacob Collier during the next break.
Okay.
But for any of you who haven't seen him, he is amazing and you should check out. First thing I'd recommend checking out, like my favorite thing he's got out right now is a song called Little Blue, but specifically the Mahogany Sessions. Yeah, right there. That is incredible.
What was it?
He's a musician. He's one of these freaking like music prodigies. Both of his parents have spent their whole life as professional musicians.
Okay.
His mom's like a first chair freaking violinist who teaches violin, and like they're like super I don't know. Anyway, he just grew up immersed in music.
Yeah, they just
and
got
like
a
music is like,
multi-talented.
You know how kids who like grow up in multilingual households pick up multiple languages just like like nothing.
Easy, yeah.
Like essentially music was that for him, was his second language that he just grew up with. And he's got perfect pitch hearing. He's got he's like contributed to music theory, like new ideas that people haven't.
How old is he?
He's like
pretty young.
He's pretty young. He's maybe 26 or something right now.
Oh, wow.
But he's already got 6 Grammys. He's ridiculous.
Damn.
Herbie Hancock kicks it with him and talks music theory, like speaks him up highly. He's like
Jacob.
He's got like access to all the greats. Even Hans Zimmer, you know, like the famous composer. He's like Jacob Collier can do stuff I don't even understand.
Wow.
Yeah. He's nuts.
I have to give this a listen now.
Yeah. So he's been doing this thing for the last couple of years that he discovered, like experimenting around at his shows, like with crowd participation, where he gets people to sing a note, and then he'll get like different sections of the crowd, like the center, he'll set them with a note. He'll set the left with a different note and the right with a different note, and he'll direct them up and down.
Yeah, yeah.
And he'll like sing and harmonize with them.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I didn't know who it was or what it was, but I watched the whole video and I was like, "Ah, cool." And
yeah, that's why it looks
scrolling through, you know.
That's why it looks like it's played there on your YouTube. That one, the little blue.
Oh yeah.
That's the one. It's incredible. He's nuts.
I have. So I do know this. Okay, I just didn't know I knew.
Yeah. So we saw him last night. And the whole time, like ahead of time.
Where'd you guys go for that?
We went to Bill Graham's Civic Auditorium in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And Kimbra opened for him, and she's amazing too. So it's just super cool.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Who'd you go with?
I went with John and TJ and Dietrich's Tom. Came up.
Sick.
He's also a huge Jacob fan.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. Like watching him like direct those choirs like that, like in this one, it's easy to look like you might think these are professional musicians, like an actual professional choir. These are people he just put out a call to on social media, and they just showed up for the day. So I'm sure, obviously, some of them probably have like choir experience and stuff, but like all of them. Their first time experiencing the song was that day, and he coached them through like learning the chorus, and then he just riffed off of the orchestra part. It's amazing. He's also got this freaking 5-string guitar that he got custom made by Taylor, because he's like, I only have 5 fingers. Why do I want 6 strings? But he's also got like his own unique tuning for it and everything.
Wow, so it's not even a traditional guitar.
It's a 6-string neck with 5 strings on it. So he's actually got more space on it, so he can do like longer bends and stuff. He's got more space to work with on the fretboard. Dude, it's so cool. Highly recommend. But yeah, start with the Little Blue Mahogany sessions. Check that out. See if you like it. If you do, dive into his stuff, because it's amazing.
Hell yeah. I know I am.
So that was a fun night last night. I didn't get a lot of sleep though, but
well, you're not getting any sleep tonight, so unless you can sleep in tomorrow,
right? All right, let me finish off this section, and then we'll go into the clip that you brought.
All right.
So this is falling off right from the last bit, but it's a new section called Unknown Mechanisms. He says, an argument along lines similar to the materialist one is that we should not consider reincarnation as a possibility because we do not know of a mechanism that could explain it. We do not know how a consciousness might survive without a body, how it could affect a developing fetus, and so on. The weakness of this argument is fairly obvious on the face of it, but even more so when we consider it in other contexts. For we are fortunate that the field of medicine has not been has not waited for mechanisms to be uncovered before taking advantage of effective treatments, since physicians have successfully used numerous medications before knowing their mechanism of action. The mechanism of gravity was a complete mystery at the time that Isaac Newton proposed the concept, but people accepted its existence nonetheless. We did not have a mechanism to explain it until Albert Einstein proposed his general theory of relativity that gravity is the warping of space and time. This case demonstrates that even arguing that no mechanism is conceivable is not enough to reject an idea, since the warping of space and time was certainly an inconceivable idea when Newton proposed the concept of gravity. Unless we are willing to say that we know that no mechanism is even possible, we should not dismiss a concept simply because we don't know its mechanism.
Yeah.
And I super agree with that. Should we play that video that you brought us? Yeah, so this is
Rizwan Virk.
on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah. Episode 21 to 51. This guy, Dean, kind of talked about it on the previous podcast and a little bit of his background. He kind of does his own little introduction in this clip, but his theory is still in progress. You could tell like he's still working it, and he's still playing with new ideas because he's open-minded and he's investigating this to the best of his ability.
Right, but his theory is essentially I would call it like almost a variation.
It's
on
like
simulation
a
theory.
video game version of simulation theory, where it's specifically designed like we design video games. Because of his background, he's able to see it, and he kind of uses the metaphor of video games for all of his ideas.
He uses it as a useful metaphor, but
Yeah.
he doesn't necessarily think it is a video game per se. It's just a really good metaphor for kind of what he's talking about.
Yeah, and it honestly sounds like it's like a reincarnation thing too. Like imagine like the ability, like if you're actually
Like when you play a video
outside-
game and you freaking lose a life and you start over.
right?
Yeah.
Right, but then the ability to like have your character themselves be able to remember their previous.
Well, you as the person in control of the video game who's piloting the controller, you are
Yes,
the
that's
quote
true.
unquote soul, and the avatar in your game would be the analogy would be the physical body here in this world, right? So when that body dies, you as the player don't die,
Right.
and you can start a new game. You can boot up a new game in a whole new universe and go from playing Call of Duty to playing Harry Potter. You know, like maybe you can incarnate into a different one of the multiverses, you know?
I guess my point is like connecting it to this topic, the reincarnation, on the evidence that they're presenting, and like it's just the idea of like if this is like a video game and that's the type of reincarnation, like then like what's the mechanism for like remembering, and like if the idea outside of this is that you're a player who's just sitting there playing games, opening programs, or is it more of like there's like a soul purpose that's like outside of all the different types of existence you can be plugged into, and when you die you go into a void where you can pick and choose the different types of existences?
I mean, you got to remember to keep the context, right? So let's zoom back in on the video game. We're playing Call of Duty. That soldier doesn't know anything about Drew Glover's life, right? Drew Glover's existence outside of Call of Duty. All it knows is what's happening in Call of Duty, if it knows anything, right? And you could even go so far as to say that you had a sole purpose, that Call of Duty character has a sole purpose for doing what it's doing. And that sole purpose is that you want to play Call of Duty. You as the soul wanted to do something, and it's just there to fulfill that.
It's just a vessel to fulfill the need.
Right.
So I was just trying to blend it in with this reincarnation a bit because, you know, they kind of, you know, they don't mesh all that well.
Yeah. All right, let's hear this little clip, see what he's got to say here. there's a lot more in this episode, and I recommend you guys check it out.
Yeah,
It's
definitely
a
check it
great
out. We're only going to
episode.
play a little bit.
We'll link to it, but we're just going to give him his kind of intro to the topic here.
Yeah, well, so first question, how did I get involved in this, right? So, I was a video game developer in Silicon Valley, and then I became an investor in the video game industry, and my background's in computer science. And what happened was after I sold my last video game company back in 2016, so we're talking 7 years ago now, 8 years ago now, and I put on a virtual reality headset and started playing a VR ping pong game. Right now, these headsets were even bigger than they are now, and they were wired, so there's no mistaking you're in virtual reality. But what happened was that the ping pong game was so realistic that for a moment my brain forgot that this wasn't a real game of table tennis. So much so that I tried to put the paddle down on the table and I tried to lean against the table. But of course there was no table. So the controller fell to the floor and I almost fell over. I had to do one of these double takes like, oh wait, I'm just in VR, right? So I started to think about how long would it take us to build something like the Matrix, something that's so immersive that you would forget, right, that you were inside a video game. And so that led me to this idea of the simulation point, which is a kind of technological singularity. But then I started to research things like quantum physics and some of the mysteries around, the observer effect and quantum mechanics. And then I started to look at all the world's religions, and I realized that they're all kind of saying the same thing, which is that there is no physical universe. And so, that led me to the conclusion that we are most likely inside some kind of a computer simulation or a massively multiplayer video game, depending on how you look at it. But
so he does say that we could be in some kind of multi,
like an MMO RPG type of massive multiplayer online game in the universe. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is just one aspect of the different runs you can do of the simulation, or that there's parallel simulations going on. Because even now he talks about our abilities, like some laptops and computers have split processing abilities, and they can and that's just us. And now imagine having the ability to make multiple simulations and run them.
Once quantum computing really takes off, the simulation abilities will be pretty
unreal,
crazy.
And video games are going to be the pioneer of that in space because of the interactiveness. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of companies that are going to push onto that too, that are outside of video games that want to advertise, sell things. You'll have what you already have with the metaverse starting up with Mark Zuckerberg and the metaverse that they have. They're selling real estate in there, and people are buying land, and I guess if you can call it land.
Last time I checked in on that, it's been a couple of years, but last time I checked in on that, no one was really embracing it. I don't know if it's kind of taking off.
It's probably just clunky. And it's probably going to this will be the funny thing that happened where they tried it and it didn't work, but then some new company will pop up and they'll do it really well.
Yeah. Because the long-standing idea of the metaverse before Mark Zuckerberg stole the term, it already existed, and the idea was like the internet, right? Where it's a decentralized thing that is multiple connected,
interfaces,
services. And Mark Zuckerberg is no, I'm just going to call my company Meta, and then I'm going to create the metaverse. Oh yeah, that thing. Now it's just a branded term. So every time everyone talks about it, now you're talking about Facebook. Yeah, which I don't like.
We'll stick to multiverse, and we'll stick to, I don't know, what do they call it in Ready Player One? Did you see that movie?
I think they called it the metaverse, didn't they?
Something like that. Yeah. No, Oasis.
Oh, right.
It was the Oasis. That's what it was.
Yeah. I mean, simulation theory, when you hear him describe it like that, it's essentially just sounds like a deeper, like a better, what am I trying to say? It just sounds like a variation on like religious ideas, you know,
Yeah.
like
Well,
the idea of having a soul that exists outside of the physical reality, you know?
Yeah, it's a different spin on it. It's more of a modern spin on the same kind of ideas.
And
But
why I think it's an important theory is because for some reason couching it in those words like allows scientists to take it seriously.
yeah,
Whereas when you essentially have the identical theory couched in the terms of, you know, religion, then science is like, no, that's a bunch of BS.
exactly.
We have no proof of heaven or hell. And then they think about the
Yeah.
then they think about, you know, simulation theory, and they're like, well, it's almost for sure, you know, that we're in a simulation, you know, but they're just using tech terms. Like I don't know how many of them realize that they're essentially arguing for heaven and for spirituality. And they're essentially arguing that all of these spiritual concepts that have come down through the ages are true, but just in different language.
Right. Yeah, wasn't it George Howard? I don't know. It was a story he told. Can't remember if it was him or if he was talking about somebody else, but that found the religious side of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh yeah. What's it called?
El-Hammam.
Yeah, el-Halal or something.
Oh.
Dang it. What is it? Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't know how to spell that.
Yeah, he talked about it in that Danny Jones episode that he was on. And
Tall el-Hammam
there it is.
is a Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley that was discovered, and it appears to have been the victim of an airburst. And yeah, George Howard talked about it. Some of the Comet research people, I think, were involved.
Yeah, in the discovery. Yeah. I was also looking into George Howard since our last conversation too, and a lot of the stuff he was talking about.
Yeah.
And how he came into the research and stuff, and
Yeah.
the way he
You
talks
watch
about
his
the
Danny
Carolina
Jones
Bay.
video?
Yeah. The way he talks about the Carolina Bays with the video, with the pictures up and stuff, like, yeah, it's, I mean, the only thing that I'm like, I want to see the evidence and like just look at it is like why there's such a gap. And they claim that it's the sandy bottom.
It's the difference between the types of soil.
Yeah.
So if you're in a sandy ground area versus a clay ground area,
Yeah. It shows up differently.
yeah,
Or
like
it doesn't show up at all in certain areas.
Yeah, sand can like take an impact and it will keep it like preserved unless something else comes and changes it. Whereas clay,
Yeah.
it will it's like squishy, you know. So like the pressure above it will cause it to like fill in gaps. So like a crater in clay won't necessarily last.
Yeah, and he described it as anybody listening, you should go look it up and look at pictures of this too. But
I'll link a picture here.
In the sandy soil, he described it as like, because if you have sand and water mixture and then you vibrate it violently, it turns into quicksand. And because those soil types are like that, the impact would have liquefied the ground.
Yes.
And it would have created the divot and the crater, and it kind of like swallowed the comet in a sense. Obviously, it impacted, but then it would solidify, and that's what they have now. A lot of those are lakes. A lot of those are
some of them are lakes. Some of them are
swamps.
just fields, swamps.
But they're
many of them were
now.
not even like noticed until we had aircraft to fly over and see them.
Right.
And some of them weren't noticed until we could like scan the ground, because for some of them the evidence is like under whatever the topsoil is. But once we finally had airplanes and were able to fly around and survey the area, there was just literally thousands of them that were found.
Yeah. And they all orient. They all have these ellipse patterns that he describes, and they all orient
elliptical
to
in shape.
basically where the Great Lakes are.
Yes.
That's where they meet, is like in that area of the Great Lakes. That's their idea, is that the impact happened up there on the North Atlantic, the northern ice sheet, because it was down pretty far. There it is. Yeah. So it almost looks like there's two impacts on that image.
Well, this is the area, like this is, oh, yeah, you're right. Which, I mean, it is what their theory is that there was multiple impacts.
Yeah, because a lot of them were dated, because they kind of put this is a newer photo, I can tell, because a lot of the data, what they were describing was a lot of the data was fragmented. So it was a wider area that a lot of them were pointing to. So I think they just narrowed it down and showed two impacts instead of just one large area where multiple impacts could have happened. Mm-hmm. So this is a cleaner map because it shows the two impacts and it shows their trajectories towards the impact sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, that plus like a lot of the microspherals and nanodiamonds and a lot of that evidence and the evidence of floods, like it's so obvious. Yeah. But let's get back to that was a tangent. Do you have anything? Do you want to end this segment with?
Yeah, let's cover the next section here.
All right.
And I'll just paraphrase this one before we go to break here. So this section is talking about the population explosion. So this is like an argument that people put forth against reincarnation.
Okay.
So some have argued that population growth rules out reincarnation as a possibility. The reasoning goes that the increase in the numbers of humans in modern times means that all the individuals currently alive could not have been reincarnating through multiple past lives because the modern population is so much larger than the populations in the past.
It's a simulation.
A number of objections undercut this argument. In the first place, reincarnation does not have to happen to everyone. Some might get reborn because of unfinished business from their previous life or because of the manner of their deaths or some other factor, but others might not get reborn. The modern individuals would possess previous lives even if most would not, or some would, while even if most don't. We also have no reason to think that new individuals could not be created. So again, even if all individuals have multiple lifetimes, some people who are currently alive could have had past lives while others could be here for the first time.
Right.
In either of these situations, the number of individuals living at a given time would be irrelevant. You can't disprove reincarnation just based off of population numbers. No.
And what it does do is give me what I like to like, just like all the like the back to secret history of the world and like the creation, story and like from that point of view and stuff. Like it's almost like the story of new souls being born and like they talk about like the transformation of the vegetable life to animal life and like it's like right. And they talk about like the souls of the identity or souls of humans being implanted in.
Yeah. In that sense, it could be that, like the reincarnation is essentially like, it's like a mountain that you climb. Yeah. Like you as a soul have to go through the process of all the lower animals to like build up to being a human, maybe. I don't know.
Or to the next level, right? There might be something outside of this type of physical, where you're still conscious and you're still like like you have like a physical representation, but it's out of the materialist world where it's like you can live I don't know. I guess that's just my hope.
Yeah.
But, you know.
There's another argument against it too. So he shows Dr. Bashai quotes a calculation using a start date for human existence of 50,000 BCE. That estimated that 105 billion human beings have lived on Earth. Since population growth is predicted to max out around 10 billion people later this century, the number of humans in the past is certainly big enough to allow for reincarnation, even if everyone does reincarnate.
Well, way more. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. And I would imagine there would be some sort of, like, I mean, I guess we could just be all eternal souls and there would be no born, like the souls itself never, die. But
Yeah. I mean, maybe they move on. Maybe some of them have fulfilled their life purpose, and they're moving on to other things. And maybe there's something you have an option to incarnate into after humans. Once your human purpose is done. But
well, something to ponder while we take a break.
Adios. Welcome back. So weird. We're listening to a song called Harmonics right after I showed Drew the Jacob Collier video.
Yeah, that was
with him making the audience
special.
Harmonize.
Yeah.
With him. There's a
So you went to that show.
Yeah, someone had actually uploaded a video from the show I was at yesterday.
Yeah, you showed,
and I showed him that. But then I showed him this one that's like just super special, which is
very good.
It's on the PBS YouTube channel. It's called Laufey, Doty, and Jacob Collier perform Wild Mountain Time with NSO.
I think that's the
orchestra.
Yeah.
Watch
Kennedy
it,
Center.
and I'll leave
it's
a
on
link to
PBS.
it.
Yeah, it's on PBS.
But yeah, they do the audience choir, but they also have like Doty and I think
Laufey.
It's not. I don't think that's actually how pronounce her name. I think it's Laufey. She's from Iceland. Anyway, but yeah, like getting the freaking orchestra involved too. Like so, like they're singing the song,
crowd,
and then they bring the crowd in, and then like they bring the orchestra in with the crowd, and then they come back in with it, and it's just.
Insane.
It's a lot and it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like a 10-minute long video, but it's a worth watch.
And you know what? I want to just play this little snippet. This is the conductor of the orchestra. He says a little word here at the end.
All right.
And check this out.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your future. I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah, man. I feel that.
Wow. Yeah, that was something.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he like perfectly had everything timed and like ready, and like he was given just a glimpse back to the conductor to let him know like certain cues.
Yeah.
And, like,
well, and also the
he's
fact
just
that it
doing it all
actually
at the same
wasn't
time.
perfect. You know, like
Sure.
like there was a couple moments where like the crowd's like, "What do you want us to do?" And they all started
Yeah,
laughing,
yeah.
but he kept like reeling them back in,
Yeah.
and like it just shows like the authenticity of it. He just goes with it, and he's able to recover even with the whole crowd laughing. You know,
Yeah, he's
It's
a very good
hilarious.
performer.
Yeah,
Very good performer. And he's got like a very soft but like powerful voice.
yeah, he's got these really deep low tones,
But it's
that he
soft.
sings with.
Yeah.
Yeah, super warm.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, please go watch that. This guy, this is our future for real. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, legitimately,
But
some
you were
of
saying that
the
he's-
biggest people in music are like calling him like a
Guru.
like definitely like a once in a generation type of musical talent,
Wow.
which is incredible.
So, yeah, and you were saying he contributed to like music theory and like some of their ideas of like, you know, music in general.
He got he's got actually. So if you who are listening is into music and you haven't like done the dive into Jacob Collier yet, he's also got a ton of YouTube videos on his own channel where he breaks down his Logic sessions. And he'll actually like walk you through how he created the song, like all the layers involved, like what he did to achieve it. And he's like super open with his knowledge, and he just loves like teaching and spreading the like love of music.
Oh,
So
that's
there's
cool.
tons of his music out there, but there's also tons of his like music education out there where he's teaching people and explaining like how his brain works and all this stuff. It's pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah, he's open sourcing his talent.
Yeah, exactly. More people like him, please.
For real.
Anyway, let's get back into this book.
All right, let's go.
So this next section, remember, we're talking about like arguments against it, right? And addressing them. So this one is Alzheimer's disease, which is an interesting point. Another argument is that the loss of memory and personality that comes with the brain deterioration of Alzheimer's disease shows that an intact brain is necessary for consciousness to occur. If memories and personality features cannot survive the partial destruction of the brain, they surely cannot survive death. In considering this, we can acknowledge that a person certainly needs an intact brain to express memories and personality, but that does not necessarily mean that the brain is producing those things. William James looked at this question in the late 1800s in relation to the overall question of life after death. He suggested that the brain, rather than producing thoughts, might permit or transmit them.
Yeah.
In this transmission theory, he likened the brain to a colored glass that sifts and limits the color of light that passes through it. Even though it does not produce the light that passes through it,
Filters it.
right. He pointed out that though consciousness depends on the brain to transmit it into the natural world, this dependence could be quite compatible with the possibility of its continuing supernaturally after the end of a life. He said that when the brain decays or stops altogether, the stream of consciousness associated with it vanishes from the natural world. But the sphere of being that supplied the consciousness could still be intact. I do not know if James would have approved of the following analogy, but we can consider the modern example of a television. And honestly, this analogy is a little dated now because no one actually watches TV from broadcast anymore.
Yeah.
But we'll go with it. If your television breaks, the stream of images that it's supplied no longer are no longer present for you to enjoy. But since it simply transmitted those images instead of creating them, the television programs continue to exist until you find another television to bring those images to life in your home. Similarly, the consciousness that found expression in the natural world through a particular brain may continue after the brain decays or dies, and it may then associate with a new brain or a new transmitter at a later date. Maybe a better modern analogy is a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
So your cell phone gets data through the air, right? So you're watching YouTube on your phone, and if your phone dies or breaks or you drop it in the lake,
YouTube doesn't break.
right?
Yeah.
It's
That would
still
be
there waiting
not
for
good.
you to have your next phone to connect to it.
Right.
So that's kind of the analogy for any of y'all young enough to not have ever watched broadcast TV.
Right.
So this line of reasoning does not prove that such a phenomenon actually happens. James pointed out that the idea that the brain produces consciousness out of nothing is no more simple or credible in itself than any other theory, such as the proposal that it is an organ that transmits consciousness. Indeed, science has made little more progress today in pinpointing a source of consciousness in the brain than it had in James's day 100 years ago.
Yeah.
The next section is on religious objections. Although reincarnation is not part of mainstream Judeo-Christian doctrine, some members of those religions have believed in it. Many in the West today believe in reincarnation as individuals, and some Judeo-Christian groups have included reincarnation in their beliefs. In Judaism, the Kabbalah includes reincarnation, which is also part of Hasidic Jewish belief system. Some groups of early Christians, particularly the Gnostic Christians, believed in reincarnation, and some Christians in Southern Europe believed in it until the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 CE. Exactly what happened at that meeting has been a source of controversy, but church leaders there were believed to have condemned the idea of souls existing before conception.
Okay.
So, yeah. And he does more on the religion. I just didn't highlight it at all. I just thought the information about the Judeo-Christian beliefs, like, because that's the main, like, groups of religions that people are like, well, these people say there is no reincarnation. But it's not exactly true. If you're a modern Christian and your church doesn't believe in reincarnation, or your pastor says it doesn't exist, like the early Christians did, like the Gnostics and some of the early Christians before the Romans, edited the Bible.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of there's enough religions around the world and, ideas of reincarnation, whether it be like a whole system laid out as part of their faith or just an understanding that this isn't the end, or, like there's some idea of like the soul goes on, you're going to heaven, which is a form. Just because you don't reincarnate into this life doesn't mean you're not incarnating something else. You're not just pulled into some other incarnation just automatically. And maybe a lot of the reincarnation cases are just people who are attached or have unfinished business, and
Sure.
So that's why you get a lot.
But
of
you
those
can also
types of
see
stories.
what would motivate the Catholic Church to not include reincarnation, because if reincarnation exists and you're kind of coming in and out of lives, what does that say about the concepts of heaven and hell? What does that say about the church's moral authority over you? So,
right. I mean, I think we just need to get past that a bit.
Yeah. So I think we're moving into the end here. So we're on chapter 10.
All right.
And this is conclusions and speculations. And I think the speculation stuff is really fun. So to review the possible explanations for this phenomenon, the best normal explanation in the cases of birthmarks and birth defects involves coincidence for the birthmarks and faulty memory by informants for the statements that the children make. In the cases that primarily involve statements by the child, knowledge acquired through normal means can be used for cases in which the previous personality either was a family member of the subject, or lived in the same village. And faulty memory by informants is the best normal explanation for most of the others. We got the crier. How's he doing?
He needs to find his pacifier.
Give him a second, or
Yeah. Do a quick pause.
okay. The kiddos are back down.
Settled for sure, but see if that holds.
Yeah. All right, I'll start this chunk again. So, to review the possible explanations for this phenomena, the best normal explanation in the cases of birthmarks and birth defects involves coincidence for the birthmarks and faulty memory by informants for the statements that the children make. In the cases that primarily involve statements by the child, knowledge acquired through normal means can be used for cases in which the previous personality either was a family member of the subject or lived in the same village. And faulty memory by informants is the best normal explanation for most of the others. It's clearly not sufficient, however, for the cases with written records that were made of the child's statements before the previous family was identified. So we have to resort to fraud as a way to explain those. The best normal explanations for the past life behaviors of the child are fantasy combined with coincidence and faulty memory by informants. But they both have weaknesses. Finally, in the cases with recognitions by the children, we can use faulty memory by informants to explain many of them. But we're again left with fraud as the only normal explanation possible for the controlled recognition tests.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be.
Yeah, so...
And yeah, I guess it would depend on how much of the study were those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was the number, and like,
Well,
was it a plausible enough number that
this is
it
where
could
you're...
be?
This is where, like, a proper application of Occam's razor comes in, because what is a simpler explanation? Is it simpler to say, out of these millions of cases, in some of these it's this, in some of these it's that, in some of these it's this, in some of these it's that, all of them are wrong, and all the things that all seem to be pointing towards the same thing, it's actually a combination of 10 different explanations that all kind of work together. None of them are right, though. That's pretty complicated, and it's not a very simple explanation.
Right.
The simplest explanation that explains all the evidence is that reincarnation is a thing. It's the simplest explanation. It's not, dang it, I forgot the word from it. Consilient?
Yeah.
It's not consilient.
Right.
And so that makes scientists want to reject it and go for the less likely, due to Occam's razor explanations, that modge-podge of different explanations.
Yeah,
Whereas
so
if they
weird.
follow their own Occam's razor that they tout, you know, then Occam's razor would tell you reincarnation is the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
So,
And to focus our efforts in that, not hiding it. But maybe they're just Agent Smith and they're the ones keeping everybody in the simulation, and reincarnation is a mechanism within that. And
yeah.
stop me at any time. Simulation. It's all simulation.
It's all simulation. Video games all the way down.
Yeah.
Since no single explanation can explain all the cases, the only feasible way at this point to explain them through normal means is to say that a normal process produces each case through some imperfection in the case, and different processes are responsible for different cases. In considering this, we should first note that no perfect case exists. Perfection is rarely found in science. And for any medical study that is done, someone can always find a way to criticize it or to doubt its finding. This is particularly true in the study of spontaneous phenomena. These cases do not take place in a laboratory where we can control all the conditions to produce the cleanest cases possible. Instead, they take place in the real world of uncontrolled conditions. Some phenomena occur in nature and cannot be reproduced in a lab. And if we think that they are important enough to study, then we have to accept the limitations that come with it. Right. So certain things we want to study, and you just can't make it happen in the lab. So like your strict controlled scientific tests, it's just not feasible.
It's out the window right away.
Right. So if you think it's important, you want to study it, you have to accept studying it in the real world. And studying it in the real world comes with imperfections and all sorts of confusion. And it means that certain cases aren't going to be perfect. There's going to be multiple explanations. And then you have to kind of develop a body of evidence that points in one way or the other.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. It just seems like science is just setting itself up to be closed-minded in a lot of these, but...
Yeah, I mean, obviously not everyone. Ian Stevenson is a scientist, and Jimmy Tucker.
I mean, just like the accepted, like their scope,
like the mainstream materialistic view. Those people in science, Therefore, none of these cases is perfect, and we recognize that. With the imperfections, we can argue that a dishonest set of parents here, or a coincidence there, or a conversation about the previous life in front of a young child. Or else bad memory can explain each case. So perhaps together they can explain all the cases, right? So like you're essentially saying that like because these imperfections exist, like we know some cases will be some of these alternate explanations. It's just going to happen. Some kid's going to hear something and say something, and the parents will take it as a reincarnation case, and they will have faulty memories and it will go into their database, but by like raising the standard of evidence and being systematic, like then you can't like, it's one thing to say like in any particular case, like this was more likely for that, but then to try and apply these explanations to all of them across the board, without looking into all of them,
Yeah, no, that's you gotta look into all of them, obviously. Otherwise, you're just poo-pooing it at face value, just off of the.
So just because some of them are definitely going to be some of those other explanations, that doesn't mean that all of them are.
Right.
Is such an explanation satisfactory? In a particular case, we may think, for example, that coincidence is quite unlikely, but nonetheless possible. If we use such reasoning to explain all 2,500 cases, then we're taking the unlikely and raising it to extremes. After a while, looking for any conceivable defect in each individual case begins to feel like missing the forest for the trees. If we stand back and look at this worldwide phenomena as a whole, then we see a pattern of remarkable events. Even though the cases are only evidence and not proof of paranormal process, when we consider the weaknesses of the normal explanations, I don't think that they can adequately explain the strongest cases as a group. I think they fail, and therefore we must turn to paranormal possibilities to see if they can provide a better explanation.
Yeah, I mean, my on it, like right off the bat, I'm just thinking we need to study these things more and destigmatize these types of studies and get them into the mainstream, because we need money to be able to do the type of research to be able to, to actually find out what's going on. Maybe it takes somebody to look if it's a simulation to find out. Right.
And like those normal explanations, the materialistic explanations, like it's important that we consider those, and it's important that we keep them in mind, and it's important that like that is considered every step of the way, but like that doesn't mean that it's the best explanation, like it just means you're trying to be objective. You're trying not to make up your mind about a case before all the evidence is in. Right. And even when you do have the evidence, as he states, like it's not proof. It's just strong evidence, you know, like it's evidence that demands an explanation.
Right. And it needs to be researched.
Right.
It demands at least the attention of, academics and scholars. And
when we look at the different types of cases all together, reincarnation provides a much more straightforward explanation overall than either ESP or possession. It easily explains all the cases, which the others do not. And it certainly is more obvious explanation than the other two. The big question becomes whether the cases provide enough evidence of a paranormal process so that we should favor reincarnation over the normal experiences. Right. So he's saying among paranormal explanations, it's very clear that reincarnation is the best paranormal explanation. So really, it's just a question of, do we have enough evidence that the paranormal explanation is more favorable than the normal one?
okay.
In attempting to understand this, we should keep in mind some physicists now consider consciousness to be an entity separate from the brain and one with important functions in the universe. Conscious observation, at least, appears capable of affecting the future and even the past on the level of the microscopic quantum world. And if consciousness is indeed a fundamental part of the universe, if Stanford physicist Andre Lindy is correct when he says that a consistent theory of everything that ignores consciousness is unimaginable, then the world is a far more complex and wondrous place than what the physical world shows us in everyday life.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I believe that too.
The evidence in our cases supports this idea. And for the remainder of this chapter, we will operate from the perspective that if this is true, we can consider what the cases may tell us about the process of reincarnation. We will have to speculate a fair amount as we do so, and we should remember that the world of consciousness may operate very differently from the physical universe. Therefore, any conclusions that we may make about reincarnation are tentative at this point, but we have some fascinating questions to explore. So, this is the part where he starts speculating.
On his, personally?
Yeah. So he's got a section here talking about, does everybody reincarnate? Which we can go into if you want to, but I didn't really, I kind of had it highlighted. I had the title, but not text highlighted.
I would assume everybody reincarnates. It's just remembering.
Yeah. Let's go over this because I like this. Like the speculative stuff is what really gets me interested.
Mm-hmm.
When we see evidence for reincarnation, one reaction is to think about how it could affect us as individuals. Clearly, we would all love the opportunity to see our deceased loved ones again. We can think about the emotions that Patrick Christensen's mother must have felt when she determined that her first son, who had died as a toddler, had returned to her. A loss of that kind is obviously devastating, and we would all be comforted to know that such a loss might not be permanent. Unfortunately, we must remember that what is true about the children who report past life memories may not be true for the rest of us. They may be a unique group, and even if they have reincarnated, no one else may have. For instance, they may have had issues that kept them connected to their earthly experiences so that they came back while others don't. The situation could be like stories of haunted houses in which they say that a ghost is stuck there because of grisly death or a similar reason. As I discussed earlier, 70% of the previous personalities died by unnatural means. In cases where the mode of death is known, and of course, a number of those dying by natural means died suddenly as well. This suggests that a violent or sudden death is much more likely to produce a future case of a child with past life memories than other types of deaths. Such death may be one factor that can cause our subjects to have connections to the earth that lead them to be exceptions to the normal state of affairs. After death, consciousness may typically blend into a larger universal consciousness or go off in another realm of existence, heaven, for example. For all we know, the traditional Judeo-Christian views of life after death may be correct in general, or even if our cases are legitimate cases of reincarnation. On the other hand, reincarnation may normally occur, but without memories continuing from the past life. In that case, we may have all had previous lives, even though most of us don't remember them. Right. If this is true, then the usual process may get disrupted either by a factor in the previous life, like an unexpected death, or by some factor in the next life. This may lead to some memories to be present in the next life, and therefore, even though everyone may reincarnate, our cases are unusual because of the presence of the memories. Mm-hmm. The cases do not answer which possibility is more likely. It could be either past lives being unusual or just the memories of past lives being unusual. Wait. Past lives being unusual or just the memory of past lives being unusual. Even though they indicate that reincarnation occurs in some circumstances, although we would all like to see our deceased loved ones to return to us or return to return ourselves to our children or grandchildren after our death, these cases do not answer the question of whether reincarnation is universal. They provide evidence that we can reincarnate, at least under certain circumstances, which is certainly a significant finding, but they don't indicate if all of us actually do. Even if we do all reincarnate, the patterns we see in the cases with memories may not apply to the rest of us. The type of death or some other factor might change the normal process to produce patterns that could go along with the enduring memories. For instance, children who've had past life memories may be more connected to a certain location than others would be.
Or a certain family.
Right. These children tend to reincarnate close to where their previous personality lived, yet others who reincarnate without memories may not be similarly constrained. Likewise, the children who describe staying in one particular location for years between lives may not be typical of all who reincarnate. We should remember that other differences could occur as well between the cases of children who have past life memories and any others who reincarnate without such memories.
Yeah, it's almost like when you die, have a sudden death, there's a block. And whereas if somebody else died right next to you, theirs just kind of goes out. Like if theirs was like a natural death.
Yeah.
At the, nursing home next to you or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, you died suddenly by somebody shooting you outside the building or whatever. Like you have this block that like blocks you in because of this sudden, but then the other, the person who died of natural causes, floats up and goes wherever. And that process is what wipes your memory. And then when you reincarnate, you just have no idea that what happened before. But when you hit that block, you still go through the same, you don't go through the same process as the others. And that's why it's usually 18 months, and then you get the ghost and the poltergeist and all these other phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And those could be those, stuck souls just waiting to find a new body or whatever.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, your future kid is freaking haunting you and making stuff drop off your fireplace. It's just being a practical joker while it kills time waiting for you to get pregnant.
Yeah. Or he's just doing whatever, floating around, seeing the world. I don't know. Yeah.
Here's an interesting question that he kind of goes on for a while with. In cases of reincarnation, what reincarnates?
As in the mind or the...
Yeah, so despite these reservations, we should still examine these cases closely to see what they say about life after death. One question is this: if cases are examples of reincarnation, then exactly what reincarnates? The case shows that memories, emotions, and physical traumas can carry over to the future life. I've referred to a consciousness continuing, but this is not a very specific term. Other terms can be used, such as soul, astral body. Those have specific connotations we may not feel are accurate. For that reason, Dr. Stevenson coined the term psychophore, which is a cool word. psychophore, which he derived from the Greek meaning soul-bearing to describe the vehicle that would carry the memories after a death.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Psycho. But
My favorite type of music is psychophore music. Soul music. Soul-bearing. This entity, the psychophore or consciousness, appears to be able to obtain new information based on cases in which children describe events that occurred after the previous personality died. We might wonder, how could it do so? Since the consciousness obviously does not have any sense organs like eyes and ears, the answer must be that it can get information through paranormal means. This is similar to the reports of patients who have near-death experiences, as they often describe watching events from above their bodies. It also fits with other studies in parapsychology that show some people are able to gain knowledge that they do not obtain through their normal sense organs. Rather, they gain it through paranormal means. And though we do not know what those means are, if a person can do so during a life, then we can logically assume that their consciousness could do so if it survives death.
yeah, why not?
Right? I think we're over for a break. You want to take one?
Take a little break.
Okay.
We'll be back.
We shall be right back. Enjoy a little bit of sunshine.
said we were getting into kind of the end there.
Yeah.
We're doing some more speculation.
Yeah, we're still in speculation territory. So this section is the when and where of reincarnation. It says, let us now consider whether the surviving consciousness has any control over when and where it is reborn. In a number of cases, the children have reported that they chose their next parents. In the Asian cases, they sometimes describe an episode in which they see one of their future parents and decide to follow the person home to join the family. In the American cases, the children may talk about being in heaven and picking their next parents. Although these stories are obviously not unverifiable, Some of the Asian ones have been at least partially verified in that the parents had been in the area described by the child around the time of conception. In other cases, we think of how bitterly the children complain about the family they're in, and we may conclude that they show no sign of having chosen their parents, since most of the children do not report any memories of the time between lives. We get no indication from them if they were involved in any decision making or not. Is it possible that they were but do not have access to the memory of being so? We have no way of knowing for sure, but given the variety of cases, it is possible that some individuals choose their parents or their place of rebirth while others don't. This brings up the larger question of whether anybody at all makes decisions in the process of reincarnation. If the individual consciousness does not decide when to be reborn, do guides, angels, or gods decide? Or does it occur naturally without any conscious decision making? Various belief systems have different scenarios for how the individual goes on to the next life. Though a few of our subjects talk about the guides directing them to their current family, most of them don't say anything about the time between lives, so our cases really shed very little light on this important question.
Unfortunately, I know. I want to know more about that time.
Mm-hmm. Along these lines, we can look specifically at the location of rebirths. One conclusion we can draw from these cases is that the place where the rebirth occurs, at least in situations in which the child retains memories of the previous life, isn't random. The vast majority of the children report past lives in the same country of their current life, and many of them say that they lived in the same village or even in the same family. What do we make of this? One possibility is that geographical constraints affect where the consciousness can go to be reborn. Though the idea that consciousness would be limited to a small area seems odd. It fits with the stories by some children staying in a particular location, the place where their previous personality died, for instance, until they saw one of their future parents. I'm more inclined to believe that consciousness is drawn to particular areas because of emotional connections with them. Many of us identify strongly with being from a particular country, so we might naturally be more likely to be reborn in the same country. In addition, people have many emotional attachments to particular places and will be drawn to return to them. Most importantly, an individual's connections to other people may play a big role in where the rebirth occurs. In the same family cases, the children may be reborn in the family because of a strong emotional connection that has continued, particularly in cases in which the previous personality was a child who died young. The individual consciousness may still be closely tied to the family, so it's drawn to be reborn in it. The mechanism of how it is drawn is, of course, a mystery, but I can imagine an emotional force in the world of consciousness that would draw individuals to particular places or families with an almost magnetic pull. In cases in which the children report past lives from other countries, offer possible insight into this. In these cases, the children usually stay after they died, or the children usually say that they died in their past life in the country where they currently live. An example being the Burmese children who say they were Japanese soldiers killed in Burma during World War II.
Yeah.
Many of those Burmese children express a longing to return to Japan as if they were trapped in Burma after dying there. We don't know if they were trapped there by geographical limitations or emotional ties. Their actions as soldiers, many of whom were very harsh with the Burmese people, may have created an unresolved emotional connection that caused them to stay in Burma for their next life. Whether the explanation is geographical or emotional, we can say that these cases show that individuals often keep some links with a life after the end of it. We don't know if this is true in general or just in cases with preserved memories. But these cases demonstrate that in some situations, links do continue into the next life. In the cases of Burmese children who report memories as Japanese soldiers, A link is maintained with both Burma and Japan, and the children are born in Burma but still long for Japan.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Just the ideas of like being like located, like having it like imprinting on a certain location, and like that those are the outliers. So like, whereas if you believe that everybody reincarnates, like you're going anywhere, at any time, and maybe you spend more time in this in between space.
There was one case that we went over in one of the episodes where there was like an old woman who died in the U.S. She wasn't from the U.S., but she went to the U.S. for surgery and died in the surgery. I forget if the child was like the later personality was born in the U.S. or not.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember. But I was thinking earlier when you were talking about the case with the twins who are fighting in the womb, or who are fighting
about,
because of
like where they were
one,
born into.
They're fighting over which set of parents between two sisters or something, right?
Yeah, it was they had their previous personality had been in their cousin's family.
Right.
So at their new life, it was their previous life was the aunt and uncle of the new life.
Their new life, yeah. That's right. But they died in the womb, right? Wasn't it like a miscarriage?
Yes, it was twins in the womb who died because one of them had the umbilical wrapped around.
That's right.
And then when they were reborn separately as brothers in that family, not as twins.
At different ages, like 5 and 3 or something like that. Or at the
close,
time of this.
But they were like arguing about
what happened in the previous, which is crazy.
And the one kid was blaming the other kid for it.
Can you imagine like Wyatt and Sawyer just like won their 5 and 3, like having an argument about a previous life?
Dude, it would be pretty intense. The question of karma. Okay. So I highlighted a little bit of this one. I looked at our computer database to see if any characteristics of previous personality would correlate with the circumstances that the subject was born into. Specifically, I looked at the following items about the previous personality. Was the previous personality saintly? Was the previous personality a criminal? Did the previous personality commit moral transgressions? Was the previous personality philanthropic or generous? And was the previous personality active in religious observances? To see if any of them correlated with the economic status of the subject, the social status of the subject, or the caste of the subject for Indian cases. In doing so, I'm aware that we would consider a child with loving, supportive, but poor parents to be born into positive circumstances, but we might at least think that positive circumstances would be more likely to include higher economic settings than lower ones. When I ran the correlation tests, only one of the characteristics of the previous personality correlated with the circumstances of the subject. Saintliness in the previous personality showed a very strong correlation with the economic status of the subject and a significant correlation with the social status of the subject. This means that the more saintly the previous personality was considered to have been, the higher the economic status and social status that the child is likely to have. Saintliness did not correlate with the caste of the subject in the cases in India, and none of the other characteristics of the previous personality correlated with the circumstances of the subject. We have to consider then that the correlations that the saintliness item shows may have just been a statistical fluke, and we have little evidence that karma from the previous life affects the circumstances of rebirth.
Yeah, and you know what Rizwan was talking about at one point too is like the idea of karma, And like it not being like in their theory, in his simulation theory, he believes karma is more like a set of objectives. So like if you're reincarnating and your soul has a set of objectives that it needs to accomplish, that your karma is helping you along a path of like achieving those things. And it, you know, it's just layers on layers of like, you know, different interactions with the world that like try to get you to the point or like experience certain things or, you know, so like that's an idea of karma.
Yeah. It would be interesting. It seems a little confusing to me, like the idea of karma, just in that, like, you're being born into a new life, so I don't necessarily see why a new life...
or a previous life would affect...
Yeah, why a previous life would necessarily affect a new one.
Right.
As far as, like, karma in a karmatic way? Is that a word?
Karmic. So another thing that Rizwan was talking about, too, is, like, the idea of, like, a level system, if you were to think about it in, like, an MMORPG kind of a way.
Yeah.
Like the reason certain people are more attuned or have some ability to see certain things as phenomena in our world is they have a certain level. Like they're like if you have a character in a game, their level and you have certain abilities. So a level 2 and a level 30
they've had
person,
more lives, so they've gathered more XP in there.
Yeah, and they have different abilities, and maybe one of the abilities is to be able to see spiritual beings or UFOs or both, or you know,
which can explain cases where two people are staring at the same sky and one person sees a UFO and one doesn't. Right.
And all the different interpretations of UFOs through history.
Right.
You know, it's kind of a interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
But,
all right. Let's keep this going. We're getting close to the end here. Enduring emotions. To consider further the possible emotional links, we might like to think that the love and positive emotions we give to others can last more than one lifetime. And in the cases the cases give us hope that they may. Not only do birthmarks and phobias occur in these cases, but the children also continue to express love for the previous family. Love endures. Such an idea is not only comforting, but may well be true based on the evidence from our cases. The idea of the emotional connection, but not the roles enduring across lifetimes, can affect the way that parents look at their children, because it suggests that parents need to provide discipline for their children, not in a domineering or harsh way, but as guidance for a fellow traveler. Children can be seen as equal partners sharing life's journey instead of inferior beings, even though they are partners that need direction and need to feel a sense of security that their parents are in control. When the rebirth does not occur in the same family, the enduring connection, or at least the longing it creates, can be a problem in the new life. Many of the children show great emotional upset because they feel that they're being kept from their real parents. This generally resolves as children grow older, but it can be very intense when it is present. I noted in chapter 6, many of the Asian parents respect what their children say about their past lives, since they usually believe in reincarnation. But they also make clear to the children that the current life is different from the past one. Unfortunately, they sometimes make this point with great emphasis, and some of them use very harsh methods to get their children to stop talking about the previous life.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Even this might be better in the long run than emphasizing the link to the past life. Relationships from the past life are in the past, and we don't benefit from focusing on past lives to the detriment of the current life. Right. Some of the children certainly experience great distress in wanting to continue the relationships they recall from previous lives, and this can affect their interactions with their current parents. Similarly, some adults get so caught up in the possibility of their past lives that they neglect to experience the current one. Surely this is not the best course to take. While being aware of the possibility of reincarnation may make people more appreciative of the spiritual aspects of life and the spiritual components of others, people should not focus too much on possible past lives. I think that's wise advice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's cool that you can experience that, but I can see and it depends on their personality, right? Like, you might have that happen to you and be able to move on and be fine. But I could see it being something that like happens when you're younger and it sticks with you and it can affect your life.
Right.
Because of the focus you put on it.
Then he's got a section here with advice for parents.
Okay.
Parents frequently ask us for advice on how to handle their children's statements about past lives. Though each case has individual differences, I can offer some general guidance that I hope will be helpful. First, parents should know that these statements do not indicate mental illness. We have talked with many families in which a child claimed to remember another set of parents, another home, or a previous death, and the children rarely show any mental health problems. Several studies have looked at this question. I recently completed a study with a colleague, Dr. Dawn Nidifer, in which we looked at psychological testing results of 15 young American subjects. They were between the ages of 3 and 6 years old at the time of the testing, and we found that they were generally quite intelligent. When we looked at scales measuring problem behaviors, their averages were all within the normal range, and they did not show any evidence of psychological problems. When children talk about their past life, parents are sometimes unsure how to respond. We recommend the parents be open to what their children are reporting. Some of the children show emotional intensity regarding these issues, and parents should be respectful in listening, just as they are with other topics that their children bring up. When a child talks about a past life, parents should avoid asking a lot of pointed questions. This could be upsetting to the child, and more importantly, from our standpoint, could lead the child to make up answers to the questions. Separating memories from fantasy would then be difficult or impossible. Asking general open-ended questions, such as, do you remember anything else? Is fine, and empathizing with the child's statements that must have been scary, for instance, when a child describes a fatal accident, certainly is as well. We encourage parents to write down any statements of a past life that the children make. This is particularly important in cases in which the children give enough information so that the identifying of a particular deceased individual might be possible. In such a situation, having the statements recorded ahead of time would be critical in providing the best evidence that the child actually recalled events from a previous life. At the same time, parents should not become so focused on the statements that they and their children lose sight of the fact that the current life is what's most important now.
Yeah.
If children persist in saying they want their old family or old home, explaining that their current family is the one they have for this life may be helpful. Parents should acknowledge and value what their children have told them while making clear that the past life is truly in the past. Parents are sometimes more upset by the statements than the child is. Hearing a child describe the experience of dying in a painful or difficult way can be hard, but both parent and child can know that the child is safe now in this life. Some parents may be comforted to know that the vast majority of these children stop talking about a previous life by the time they're 5 to 7. And as I have mentioned, the memories will persist into adolescence or adulthood only on rare occasions, but they're usually much less intense than they were during the younger years. In many cases, as the children get older, they do not even remember that they ever talked about a past life. Overall, parents are often find children's claims to remember previous lives more remarkable than do the children, for whom the apparent memories are simply part of their experience of life. The children then move on from the memories to lead typical childhoods. So,
yeah,
I think that's important to the point he was making about not making like leading statements. You know?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, why it's made statements.
Or leading questioning.
Right. Just like trying to find like a specific answer to a certain thing.
Yeah.
Just
If
asking
you
them,
word
do
a
you
question
remember
in a
anything
way that like
else?
leads to the answer.
How did that feel?
then-
Stuff like that.
right. Tell me more about
Something
that.
to get them to describe it without like asking for something specific. Just let them do the
Right.
remembering, I guess.
Right. Oh, hey, look at that.
We are out of time.
Shoot. Well,
Right on time with the outro cue, huh?
yeah. Let me just,
So-
I'm going to move the outro
Alright.
music back here so you guys will not know that it came in on us. I just want to outro the book a little bit.
All right.
He talks a little bit about future research and gives a little bit of final thoughts, and then that's the end. So maybe we should just power through that real quick.
Okay.
All right, so future research. Even after 40 years of research, our work here is still very much unfinished. I'm planning to continue to focus primarily on American cases of past life memories, along with doing studies in which we look at particular facets of the cases. I hope that as more people hear about our work, we'll be able to conduct investigations of more American cases and stronger American cases. If we could study cases in the United States as strong as the best of Asia, then the work would be very hard for people to dismiss.
Yeah.
Cases have been harder to find here, but I remain optimistic that at some point we'll have a collection of cases that are so well documented that we can confidently answer the question of whether some children are able to remember previous lives. We may also have another tool at our disposal in the future to help answer that question. A number of researchers have looked into how the brain functions in recalling actual memories compared to false ones.
Okay.
So like you can like scan the brain and like tell the difference when someone's recalling
Oh, nice.
a real and a false memory.
It's like a lie detector for the brain.
Yeah. Things that people think they remember happening that actually didn't. The work is preliminary at this point. It's involved showing people lists of words. They're then showed a word and asked whether it was on the previous list. Sometimes the people think they remember seeing the word on the list when they actually didn't. Thus, they have a false memory. The researchers have done brain imaging studies in which they measure brain activity when people are recalling the false memories compared to when they're recalling actual memories. And they've found that different parts of the brain light up, are active during the different types of recall. If this research progresses enough so that such testing could determine whether particular individuals have accurate memories of events from earlier in their lives, then we might be able to use it to evaluate memories of previous lives as well. This would be years off, if ever, but it's an intriguing possibility. And then that's pretty cool, by the way. That would be pretty sweet to be able to tell that. Also pretty terrifying.
I mean, that's just going to lead to all sorts of things.
Yeah. They develop that. It will be used in, court and stuff.
But yeah.
Final thoughts. If we're able one day to answer definitively the question of whether or not we can survive death, I hope that this work with young children will be an important part of that answer. If it is, then that will demonstrate that the smallest and youngest among us have wisdom to share with everyone else. They may be old souls in new bodies. If we're all spiritual beings, we should aspire to treat others with the respect that this implies, and treating children with such respect must include listening to them. Yeah. Just as children in this book may have important knowledge to impart to us, so may others if we're ready to listen to these small fellow travelers on the most remarkable road of life. Out of the mouth of babes.
That was a pretty good outro there.
Yeah. Right? So why don't you guys hit us up? Let us know what you thought of the Reincarnation series. Did the series move you in any direction?
Yeah.
What do you think of it now? Let's go ahead and wrap this episode, though.
Please check out those episodes with Joe Rogan. I guess just the one with what's his name again?
You just had it earlier. Ray something.
Rick Sean.
Rizon. Isn't it?
Something like that. I don't know why we're forgetting now.
Yes. Rizwan
Verk. Yeah.
We'll leave a link to the episode. But follow us on Facebook, Instagram. If you're listening to this on YouTube, leave us a like, comment, subscribe, get involved in the conversation.
Check out the website, dualitycheck.net. You can get all the links to the podcast on different platforms and listen to it there. Email us.
You can email us at hosts@dualitycheck.net or message us on Facebook or Instagram. And we'll be looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. Until next time.
See ya.
Later.